Hey, welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified, where we have a conversation with Carrie Kerpen, CEO of Likeable Media and author of the book titled Work It, which is all about how women in the workplace can achieve success and happiness on their own terms. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
And I think that what would behoove Generation X is that if we focused as much on confidence as we focus to all learn how to talk about ourselves just a little bit better.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrion Porter.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Gen X Amplified, the podcast, the platform where we showcase the powerful generation of thought leaders between those magnificent millennials and those brilliant boomers to help you maximize your impact in business and life. Thank you so much, as always, for listening, for subscribing, and for sharing the word about this podcast. So we are going to get right into this episode because I am extremely excited about my guest today. And she is an award-winning entrepreneur, an author, a leading podcaster, and keynote speaker who pioneered the content as a service industry. She is the co-founder and CEO of not Hateable, but Likeable, Likeable Media, a global social media and marketing agency that she launched with her partner in crime, her husband, Dave. Now, as a podcaster, she launched All the Social Ladies, a podcast for women to share career advice and insight into how social media impacts their personal and professional lives. And now she is the author of the very recently released book titled Work It, Work It, Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business. Everyone, please welcome my Gen Exceptional guest, the lovely, the Likeable, Carrie Kerpen. Carrie, how are you?
Thank you, Adrian. I'm so excited to be here. I love a good Gen X podcast. We are definitely an underrepresented generation, and it's important to call out the amazing Gen Xers that are doing big things in the world.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That means a lot. That's why I'm here, but that's why you're here.
I love it.
And I couldn't do it without you. So, you have a great story. I've actually been an admirer of the work that you and your husband, Dave, have done for a while. I've interviewed actually on my podcast a couple of mutual friends. Jay Bear actually is one of them who actually mentioned your husband on the episode that I interviewed.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Jay's great.
Yeah, he's funny. But hey, I got Dave's wife first on the podcast. That's more important. But anyway, but yes, so seriously, what you guys have built with Likeable Media, which is tremendous, and we'll get a bit into that a little bit. But first, Carrie, I would like to briefly, if you don't mind, just start having you just unpack your personal and professional journey and how it led you to this career as the business owner of Likeable Media and now author and podcaster and Facebook watcher.
Sure. I really was not sure when I went to school what I wanted to do. I was torn between two passions that I had, marketing and working with kids. And so I wasn't sure which direction I would go in, if I would be a teacher or a marketer. Mm-hmm. And I ended up finding something that was the perfect fit in an internship. I found an internship with Radio Disney. So I ended up finding a great home in Radio Disney because it was the perfect mix of working with kids, because it was a kids radio station, mm-hmm. and also working in marketing. And that was my first internship. I loved it. I went on to work for one of their clients, which was Stop and Shop Supermarkets, and I went and ran their kids marketing program, helped teach store employees how to interact and engage with kids and how to make the stores more kid-friendly. I then went on to keep with that theme. I worked at Polaroid and I launched their iZone camera, which was a instant camera that had little tiny pictures that kids put on their lockers. So all keeping with like that kids and marketing theme. It became the number one selling camera in the country. Really cool stuff. And then I was tapped by my first internship, Radio Disney. I was tapped to go into media sales. They approached me and said, hey, we think you'd be great at sales. I was really nervous to make the jump from a marketer to a salesperson. But what I found was that I really thrived and loved it. And so that began a career in media sales, which I went on to grow to be the top seller for Disney in the country, and then grew to manage radio stations and sell media. And I was really, really happy there. And I met my soon-to-be husband. We fell in love. We actually met at work. We competed against one another in sales. He was the number one salesperson in the country, and I came in and dropped him to number two. And so, of course, a union was formed. We knew that we had to go into business together and be married and have all the things. It was an epic partnership. And so when we were getting married, my husband has a larger than life personality. If you've ever met him, read any of his books, or tweeted with him, you will know he is a very public person.
Yes.
And at this time, he really wanted everyone he's ever known to come to our wedding when we got engaged. And not just like people from high school, like Adrion, if he was on the podcast with you and this was the first time he met you, he would say, Adrion, you've got to come to my wedding. This is the type of person he is. And so we knew that we wouldn't have a place that could hold that many people. And we knew that it would be really hard to afford that kind of wedding. And so we had to think differently about it. And so we decided to approach a minor league ballpark. We're both big baseball fans, both fans of the Mets. And so we went to the minor league affiliate of the New York Mets, the Brooklyn Cyclones.
Wow.
And said to them, we're going to buy out your night. So you'll have your regular game, and normally you'll have a sponsor. We're going to sponsor your night, and we're going to resell in sponsors that are wedding themed. So in between every inning, instead of like Pepsi tossing t-shirts into the audience, as is at most baseball games, 1-800-Flowers will toss bridal bouquets, and we'll have everything be wedding themed. And then we'll get married on the field after the game. We'll raise money for charity, and we'll have a huge party in the back. It will be no big deal. We can do this.
Wow.
Yeah. So the Cyclone said, you're kind of crazy, but try it. And we did. We raised $100,000 in sponsorships. We raised $20,000 for the MS Society.
Oh, my God.
And we were married on a field in front of 5,000 friends and family and strangers.
That is.
So it was really quite the dream wedding, and really just a lot of fun. And also a byproduct of it was that we got a ton of press. So we've got national and international news coverage around this, around the first successful sponsored wedding. We were able to really do it at scale. And it was one of the most successful PR initiatives that all of the sponsors had ever done. I believe that it garnered more media impressions than most promotions that they had executed up to that point.
Oh my God, that is genius.
So all of the sponsors came to us and said, you guys, this was amazing. You have to do it again. And we said, we can't, not going to get married again, not going to have a sponsored baby. So maybe we'll just start a company. So we really had no idea what we were doing. I mean, I, at this point, had a little brand background and media sales background. And Dave had a varied background with media sales and was also a teacher, like really random. And we decided to start a agency that was based on the premise that great ideas fuel word of mouth. So it's a word of mouth marketing agency. And we ended up having really good timing, because that was 2006 when we got married and decided to start. We launched in 2007. Just as Facebook was opening up beyond the college market to be a thing. And really in the height of the social media boom. Very quickly, we realized that social media was simply the fastest form of word of mouth, and we were going to pivot to be a social media agency. So we were one of the first social media agencies in existence, because there were no social media agencies in 2007.
No, there weren't. Yeah.
And so we became experts in the space pretty early. We started growing very rapidly as a result, really because, both because obviously we established ourselves, but really there wasn't a lot of competition. So it was a great time to do that. And we grew. We became 3-time Inc. fastest growing company in the US. We won Best Places to Work in New York. It was really a wonderful time. And we grew a lot around our culture, and we worked with some great brands. And it really worked well because Dave was the visionary and the CEO, and I was the operator. I made sure everything happened. I had clients happy. I had staff hired. I had cash in the bank. Like, I just made sure that we operated. And Dave really set the vision. He was the one who pivoted us to social media. He knew what was happening before it happened. He was really, really good. And that worked really well for us. That's part of how people always ask me about like being married and running a company. That's how we made it work, was having those very separate roles.
Right.
And because Dave is a visionary, he saw what was happening next in social media. He saw that it was the great equalizer for large businesses and small. He started by writing books, which benefited, many, many thousands of small businesses. And then he decided that he was going to raise funds to build a platform that would help small businesses. Okay. Now, by the time he did that, now we're looking at, it was 2007 when we launched. Now it's 5-6 years later, we're going into 2013, and he's leaving to launch a platform called Likeable Local, and I step into his shoes as the CEO. And this is where everything really changed for me, because it was a very crowded marketplace at that time. And it wasn't the same as running a business when there was no competition. In 2013, in January when I took over, everybody was doing social media. It really wasn't new. And so I had to think about how we were going to differentiate ourselves. And the other thing that caused me a real crisis of confidence was that most of the people who were in leadership positions at companies that were growing and doing it well at these agencies were loud on Twitter and all of these things all the time. They were extroverted. They were talking about themselves unabashedly and were unafraid to put themselves out there. And they were all male. And so for me, feeling like I was watching these men literally like crush it, while I was sitting there thinking, wow, I'm not loud, extroverted, or male. I don't have what it takes to cut through the clutter to grow. I really felt stuck. And so that's when I decided to what I call work it, right? It's like I had to come up with a way that I could be true to myself and yet still grow the agency. And so for me, my work it moment came to me in the shower. I was listening to Beyonce and I was showering and I was singing all the single ladies and I was do all the single ladies.
Oh, singing in the shower, all the single ladies.
That's what I'm saying, right? You got to be relatable. So I'm singing in the shower, all the social ladies. I started thinking, wait, maybe I could grow the business a little differently. Maybe not all women like that kind of loud, extroverted, pushy dynamic. And maybe instead of telling my own story all the time about how I was crushing it, I could tell the stories about how other women in the space were doing great things. And maybe I could interview women at the brand level, and that would help me build my network and grow the business and get me in with people who I don't know. It'd be a great chance to meet people. It would be a great chance to build the business and build my network. And so I launched the podcast, and I was able to get a lot of really interesting women on the show. I would, of course, very selfishly ask them about what are your business challenges? Oh, do you use an agency or do you go in-house? Like really, questions that were so directly related to me. Right. But what I ended up doing was falling in love with more of the stories of their careers. Much like you do on this podcast, asking them to tell me their stories, give me, where you've been in your life and how you got to where you are. And so ultimately, what I did was I took that podcast, I used it to grow the business, which it did work. I built my network, and therefore my business. And people started to listen. They started to like it. I started gaining a platform. And then I was approached to write a book that wasn't really so much about social media, but was more about how women, and really anyone, can learn to work it by understanding themselves and not following the same path that everyone else follows. So it tells the stories of over 50 women, all who took kind of different paths and all who achieved success in some form. And so there's no one way to work it. Working it is about understanding yourself, understanding who you are, and using that to your advantage.
Wow, that's a great story. And definitely I can see how it led to writing this book. It's funny, things tend to start in the shower, like great thoughts and ideas. I swear I'm the same way.
Well, you know why? It's because you're literally naked. You don't have your phone by you. You're not distracted. It's just you and the soap. That's it.
I know, that's funny. Oh, that's like, yeah, that is such a catchy song too. Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's definitely older now, but yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that story, again, just what you and your husband created, and you guys early on recognized the different personalities and how it really helped you be successful because you played to your strengths. And Dave, like you said, he was the loud one. He was the one that was very, extroverted. You on the business end, he started his own company. You had to be thrusted, not had to, but you agreed to be thrusted into this new role.
Yes.
So you had to figure out a way to work it. And yeah, launching the podcast is a smart move. Definitely interesting. You initially thought, yeah, this would be great to create this platform for other voices. But, is there maybe a selfish opportunity to grow my business? But to your point, in your trajectory, you start to learn to love, just be really inspired by the stories.
Yes. And I think anything that I do, generally, time is very limited in life. And so I always look for things that are mutually beneficial. If it doesn't add value to the person who I'm connecting with, I shouldn't do it. And if it doesn't add value to me, I shouldn't do it. Really, the optimal things are things that are mutually beneficial to us both.
Now, I assume just from logistics and writing the book and publishing, so you had already pretty much built a great platform, you and your husband, even you just being kind of the CEO of Likeable Media. So I'm assuming you didn't have much difficulty landing a book deal as opposed to self-publishing.
No, I didn't. But I was hesitant. I was originally going to self-publish a book. It was going to be called All the Social Ladies, and I was just going to be a collection of interviews.
Okay.
And when I wrote the book proposal, I basically wrote a proposal to have a ghostwriter help me. Dave took a look at it and said to me, this is really good. You should send this to our agent and see if anyone would want to pick it up. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I didn't really have the confidence to think that, or the care to think that. I was like, why do I need to do that? But once I did it and Penguin Random House picked it up, it was Tarcher Perigee, which is a division of Penguin Random House. Mm-hmm. I was really excited by that legitimacy. And then I immediately said, well, okay, if it's going to be a real deal book, then I have to write it entirely myself and it has to be perfect. And it needs to be really my voice and a legacy that I leave for my children. Mm-hmm. And so I dug right in and wrote it within a 3-week period, fueled by lots of coffee and cookies.
Whoa.
What I would do is I'd do an interview, I'd record it, and then I would write the section. And then after I wrote the section, I'd have all those pieces. So it was like a puzzle. Right. And then I'd have to weave it together with my own narrative because they really wanted my own story. Right. And so I did that. And then there was a big editing process. But yeah, the actual writing was about 3 weeks.
That is awesome. And lots of coffee.
An easy 3 weeks.
Well, it's great that you had the content too from the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, right. I had it. But you know what, Adrian? I re-interviewed most people because when they basically got the book proposal, they were like, we love this, but we just want to change everything about it.
Oh, no.
They wanted, it was more about social media. And they really didn't want it to be a how-to social media book. They wanted it to be a how-to-win-at-life book for women who are struggling with their confidence or, having at a critical point in their lives.
Wow. So this is actually good to know for me because as I prepare to write my book, especially with a lot of content and stories from this podcast, which is a goal of mine. But yeah, that's interesting to hear. So the book, Work It, Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business. So Carrie, why do you feel women at this time need to have this manifesto and guide?
I think that women are receiving a million messages at once, right? We're told to lean in. We're told to be a girl boss. We're told that nice girls finish first, or sometimes nice girls finish last. We're told to be a gutsy girl. There's all of these books that have specific prescriptive recipes for what you should do to succeed. And I found that when I was reading them, only a handful or pieces of each of them related to me. And so I felt like what I wanted to do was write a book that said, it's okay to be you exactly as you are. And as many women as you see who you don't relate to, there are many others who you will. And by giving you this kind of smorgasbord of women with different philosophies, different perspectives, different approaches, you will find ones who are like your spirit animals. And they will inspire you to take the step that you need to take. So my inspiration from all the social ladies came from being in the shower. However, I get a lot of inspiration from reading about women who inspire me. And so I thought that this was a way to say it's okay to be you, exactly you, and that is how you'll succeed. Just find a few other women who inspire you, who you think, hey, I'm enough like her that I could take her path and kind of just really marinate on it and figure out how I can make it even more specific to me and better.
Wow, that's great. And for those who have not read the book, and shame on you if you haven't, but that's okay, because after this you will go get the book.
Of course.
You mentioned that you were inspired by these stories. If you wouldn't mind, Carrie, can you share some of the names of the women that were profiled? I mean, many of them are household names.
We've got Sheryl Sandberg. We've got Talisa Yancey, who's the chief marketing officer of American Family Insurance and an Ebony Power 100 winner. We've got Barbara Corcoran. We've got Reshma Saujani, founder of Girls Who Code. We've got Meredith Vieira. We've got a lot of different women who are names. And then we also have a lot of women that you don't know. And those are the women whose stories really inspire me.
Why is that?
Because I think that they don't always get a voice as much. You know, it's like
right.
we have a lot of we've heard from a lot of women who are famous, right? Or who have a platform.
Right.
I like the women who don't have a platform as much as I like the women who have a platform, because it allows them to have a voice. And I love giving women a voice and a place to share their stories, especially if they haven't had an opportunity to before.
That is awesome. I love that, because we need more of that. I mean, there are a lot of, especially with this new media landscape, a lot of great thought leaders have many platforms they can share their voice. You know, you can't, I mean, Lean In is ubiquitous, and I love Sheryl Sandberg, but the fact that you wanted to allow people that don't have that platform yet to have it funneled through your platform, I think is amazing, and we need more of that, more inspirational stories. What would you say, Carrie, are some of those key secrets to success, or for success, coming out of the book and those conversations that you had with the women profiled, specifically for Gen X women that are listening?
For Gen X women, I think there are a few lessons that are key. The first is really understanding and learning how to read your gut. Now, by the time we're the age we are in Generation X, you'd think that we'd really learned enough about ourselves that we know how to read our gut. And yet so many of us still struggle with decisions. The reasons that we struggle with decisions is there are a lot of other factors other than our guts, right? There's logic, there's external factors, there's pressures, there's thinking about other people. But really, I think one of the keys to success is learning how to understand what you truly want. And in the book, we talk about how to really read your gut, spending quiet time with yourself. There's an effective decision-making guide that helps you really channel your gut, and some exercises to help you make decisions faster. The other thing for Gen X, I think that's key, is because we are smack dab in the middle of that sort of sandwich generation where we're raising kids lots of times, we're helping our parents, we're like doing it all. You're in that age of acquisition where you have lots of expenses and all of these things, and it's figuring out how to balance. You know, one of my favorite stories comes from Cass Lazaro, who built a huge company in Buddy Media and sold it for over $800 million to Salesforce. And she talks about how she did that while she was raising 3 young kids. And she really does make it clear that you can't have it all at the same time. Like it doesn't all work in perfect balance all of the time. And understanding that and how to manage that is really key.
Yeah, that's really great insight. I mean, being open to saying yes, trust your gut, figuring out how to balance it all. You're absolutely right. So many Gen X women, and Gen Xers in general, but specifically for women, have those challenges. And even, well, I should say men too, because you're right, we are sandwiched in between those two generations, and many of us are caregivers of our parents. We're taking care. I mean, I have a 9-year-old and a almost 3-year-old daughter. And, you know, at the same time, trying to build a business, build a brand, be a loving husband, which I'm committed to all 3 and then some. But we have those challenges, but out of challenges come opportunity as well. And I think that we're uniquely wired to be able to do that, unlike any other generation. So those insights are really key. It's interesting you brought up raising kids in Gen Xers. I do want to, in thinking about your story and really researching what you've done, there was a great article that you penned that I read, which was called "The Working Mom's Guide to Raising Kids in a Digital Age."
Oh, yeah.
That was a great, and obviously for me, I really took to it because this is what I do, and I'm really passionate about understanding how Gen Xers in all facets, business and life, really adapt to all things professionally, and especially with this digital landscape. Can we discuss, Carrie, just some key takeaways from that article? Because I really think it would be advantageous for this audience to hear some of those nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, we have I talk about this all the time because it's a passion point for me. I have I really have kids that run the gamut in terms of age. I have a 15-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. I have a 10-year-old daughter who's turning 11, and then I have a 3-year-old son. And so I see how they interact with digital media and how it has changed over time. Mm-hmm. And so I've decided to make a part of my platform about communication around parenting in a digital age. And the real steps I have are pretty simple. And I put it into actually a poem because it spells poem. And it talks about 4 steps. First is participation, making sure that you don't let your kids on platforms that you yourself haven't used or experienced. Because if you need to spot check something, if you need to understand something, you really need to have used it yourself so that you can quickly access and understand. And you wouldn't let your kid go to an unknown place all by themselves for the first time without checking something out when they're young. So it's the same thing with digital media. So really, before you let them on a network, make sure that you've participated yourself. The second piece is open communication. And I go into a lot of this around just being able to have conversations, not just about the rules, which you do need rules, and having any type of contract is always a good thing, but also talking about how it feels. There are a lot of feelings associated with digital. And then the next thing is to always keep educating yourselves. I talk all the time about things like FOSI, the Institute I'm a big fan of. And then also, so FOSI.org is one of them. Complicated from Randy Zuckerberg is really great. Mm-hmm. A lot of great things. And then the last piece of poem is around monitoring and learning what works for you. There is a wide spectrum of monitoring, checking up on every move, and there are spot checking. There are lots of different tools to do that. A couple of tools that I talk about are Hour Pact, which allows you to shut off the wireless on a phone and control certain apps. And then there's also teensafe.org, which has a great monitoring platform as well.
Wow, this is really key. So I love this. So poem. So make sure I get this correct. Participation,
openly communicate, right. Educate, and monitor. And some of those tools, Hour Pact, is that what it is? Yep. And
teensafe.org.
Yep. Ooh. And then for younger kids, there's things like Net Nanny. There's all kinds of stuff. They're detailed in the article.
Wow, that's pretty cool. This is so applicable because many of us Gen Xers are the parents of Gen Z. Yep. I'm a generational geek, so I love this stuff. But yeah, we're the parents of Gen Z, which are unlike the millennials. There are some different characteristics between Gen Z and millennials, but we are their parents. So a lot of what we do and how we lead, which is one of the reasons why I do what I do, is to influence the next generation. So you have to be very careful and intentional when it comes to all these digital platforms. It's for me, and I mentioned earlier, Carrie, I have a 9-year-old son. So he obviously, he loves his iPad. We make sure that he has certain times we can be on the screen, but that's literally his first screen. Seriously, YouTubers, I know. Jake Paul, all these guys. I've learned so much from him. And
aren't they unbearable? Like you watch it and you're like, what is appealing about this? And then you feel so old.
I know. It's so...
Right? We had things that our parents felt were unappealing as well.
I know.
Jake Paul, really, I can't watch for 5 minutes.
I know. Well, hey, there are some other ones we can talk about.
It's true.
What was the guy? EvanTube. That was the first one that EvanTube. Yeah. But it's funny because, and it's interesting, I was thinking about your background too. We actually share similar professional professional backgrounds. I actually worked for Cartoon Network for about 3 years. And
Wow.
I was a senior director of marketing. So I oversaw specifically the franchises of Star Wars, Clone Wars, Ben 10. But obviously, we did work with Radio Disney. We did a lot of advertising through that platform. But that's when I really got really excited about segmentation and generational cohorts.
Yes.
Because as a marketer, that's what we do. There is some value in when you are born and you are shaped by certain things that happen in your life.
Of course.
Around the edges, give or take. But because our audience when I worked there were Gen Z. So they were kids 6 to 14. And so now as a parent of older kids that are growing, it's amazing just to see the influence of digital when it comes to Gen Z. And just thinking about us, Carrie, as Gen Xers, I do want to hear your insight on, as we continue to evolve in our careers, many mid-career professionals, which is primarily this audience, are looking to evolve professionally as far as upward mobility, or they're feeling stuck because, again, the boomers, they ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
And the millennials are coming in very aggressive, which, I don't blame them. But then you have Gen Xers. So what do? We're feeling stuck. We're squeezed. But we want to make sure that we continue to hone our skill sets and adapt to the digital landscape. What's your thought, Carrie, on how a Gen Xer can really adjust to this digital world to remain relevant, to build their brand, and just to become better leaders?
Absolutely. So I think, I saw a presentation recently on the generational divide, and one of the things that he talked about was that Gen X is the least trusting generation. We want the most data. We really want to see it and see proof before we invest in something. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, what I took from that is that we are a generation that values competence, right? We work very hard at being the best that we can be in our roles. And I think that what would behoove Generation X is that if we focused as much on confidence as we focus to all learn how to talk about ourselves just a little bit better. And I think that to me is where personal branding comes into play. That to me is where, finding a way to talk about your successes, both to your leaders at your organization in terms of upward mobility and both on social media in terms of personal branding, really figuring out how to tell your story in a way that really doesn't feel awkward to you, feels true to you, and also talks about all the good things you're doing. Because I really think that our generation kind of missed the boat on that.
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree with you. And that's one of the elements that I'm passionate trying to help solve. But it's great to hear you and hear your insight being amplified to encourage people to better tell their story, especially when I say people, obviously people in that generation.
Yeah. Well, you're leading the way on this, so that's great.
Oh, well, thank you, Carrie. Well, you're helping me do that with this conversation.
I'm glad.
So we talk about the book Work It, but you have a brand extension of Work It, the book, which is fairly new, and it's on this very small startup social media platform called Facebook, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about your new show?
Sure. So, Work It is sort of separate from the agency, right? So I'm still the CEO of the agency. I have a president in place and a great management team, and that's wonderful. But I really wanted to find a way to tie Work It to what our agency does too, to be able to tie the two together. Mm-hmm. And our agency produces content for all sorts of brands. And I thought, why wouldn't we do the same for Work It? And why wouldn't we use a platform, not just Facebook, but Facebook Watch, which has limited availability, just to showcase our close relationship with Facebook, our ability to show thought leadership on Facebook. Why wouldn't we launch a watch show? Mm-hmm. Take the same concept of the podcast, but now make it more about sort of the chapters of the book and the Work It theme, and invite people on the show who I want to know and invite people who I think I could help. And I think that for me, that worked really well. The intimacy of the watch show is really great. You sit down with somebody in the studio, you really get to know them in a way that's a little different from the podcast, which I had originally done. You're in person, you're face to face, and it gives me a deeper connection. And it also allows me to showcase some of the lessons of the book using real life examples. So this week, we have all different kinds of people. I have CMOs on there, and then I have influencers. And then just this week, I had my 15-year-old on there to talk exactly about what we were talking about, how Gen Z understands the concept of personal branding. And we took her through kind of how she positions herself on social media. And then we did a test for people to see how they are positioned on social media, whether or not they intentionally did it that way. It allows you to kind of gut check what you're doing in social media.
Yeah, I saw that episode, actually. It was really
the total
interesting.
Stranger test.
So I love it. And also I love Charlotte, correct? Your daughter?
Yes,
So
Charlotte.
so Rinstas and Finstas. All right, Carrie, I
Rinstas
had
and Finstas.
never heard of those terms before. Can you enlighten and educate our older mid-career Gen Xers on this call?
Yeah.
What in the world are Rinstas and Finstas?
Rinsta is your real Instagram. So it uses your name. It's like your personal brand space. That's your Rinsta.
Got
real Insta.
Got it.
Your Finsta is a fake name Instagram that allows you to be playful and not have to worry as much about your brand. So usually the way Rinstas and Finstas are done are Charlotte's Rinsta would be Charlotte Kerpen.
Okay.
And that would be this carefully curated, beautiful Instagram feed. And her Finsta would be something like Charbucks or, Charlotte or, something that plays off of her name but is not her name.
Right.
And that Finsta allows you to be more playful and youthful and have fun and not have it searched by a college applicant.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
That makes perfect. So Rinsta, your real Instagram profile feed.
And then your Finsta.
And your Finsta.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I would love a poll.
Your Finsta. I do not have a Finsta, but now I kind of want to have one.
I know, I wonder how many people after listening to this are
I
going to
don't
start
know.
setting up Finstas.
Do you have a Finsta?
I do not. I do, and I have a Rinsta. I don't have a.
Too.
But you know what?
I have a Finsta.
I may get a Finsta now.
I might need a Finsta. We can follow each other's Finstas.
We'll follow
we
each
can be
other.
the only followers.
We'll follow each other. Charlotte, thank you so much for educating me on.
You've inspired a Finsta revolution.
I love it. So speaking of revolutions, Carrie, Work It, the book, the Facebook Watch show. This is truly a revolution. I bought the book. I'm not a woman, but you know what? I love to read great content, and I like to be prepared. But
wonderful.
And I can work it. I can work it a little bit.
Of course you can. Men can work it. All the lessons in the book are applicable to men. It's just that I felt like it was really the right time for women to have that type of book.
I love it. You dropped a lot of great nuggets, but there's one question that I always ask all of my guests at the end of the show that I want to make sure that I ask you because can't wait to hear your answer to this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So if there was a song that would play every time you enter a room or when you walk down the street that perfectly matches your story and the awesome brand of Carrie Kerpen, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
I mean, this is pretty easy for me. It would be Work It by Missy Elliott. Of course. Of course.
Oh my God, I can hear it in my head.
I mean, the reason is
reverse
that she flips it and reverses it.
Yeah.
Like I did to have success with the podcast. She's perfect. I love Missy Elliott.
Oh, that is so great. See, and I wonder how many people probably would have thought you would have said all the single ladies. See, that's great.
Nope, no, not anymore. Well, I'm not a single lady too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true. That makes perfect sense.
The happily married lady.
Very happily married. Work it, flip it, and reverse it.
Work it.
That song is in my head. Carrie, this has been an incredible, grateful, likable conversation. You really inspired many people, not only me, but my audience. Can you tell everyone how they can get the book, but more importantly, how they can keep up with this Work It movement?
Okay, so lots of ways. So first of all, yes, on Amazon, you can go to workitthebook.com and that'll direct you to Amazon. You can check out what I'm doing in two ways. First, you can sign up for a newsletter at workitweekly.com. It's a really cool newsletter that we have going out. You can check me out at carriekerpen.com, and you can always check out Likeable at likeable.com.
carriekerpen.com, likeable.com, and more importantly, if you want just consistent content in your inbox, go to workitweekly.com. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And you can find my Rinsta at Carrie Kerpen.
You can find your Rinsta at Carrie Kerpen. And soon you'll be able to find our Finstas somewhere.
Yeah, well, you have to look real hard for that because they're going to be top secret.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. You are an exceptional guest, I must say, and it's been such an honor chatting with you.
Thanks, Adrian. I loved being on.
Okay, that was the wonderful Carrie Kerpen, CEO of Likeable Media, and the author of the book, which is titled Work It, Secrets for Success from the Boldest Women in Business. And she is also the host of the Facebook Watch show of the same name, Work It. So as always, thank you so much for listening and for downloading and for subscribing. Now to remember, to get the show notes, you can also go over to genxamplified.com, and you can also catch up on all the other episodes of the podcast. And you can also find Gen X Amplified on Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, I'm your host, Adrion Porter, and you've been listening to Gen X Amplified, the podcast and the platform dedicated to you, the powerful and exceptional generation between the boomers and the millennials. Remember, it's more than a podcast. It's a movement.